And when I can see it's recording, which it is, I'm delighted to be able to welcome Steve Deneen. Steve, where are you dialing in from today?
I'm in London.
You're in London, same as me. The sunny part or the cloudy part now? That's the question.
Depends which minute we talk to.
Exactly. Depends what minute we're on. So we're talking about Boardroom to Frontline. Steve, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks. And just because I think you might have got the company name there wrong, Andrew. Steve Deneen, the president and founder of Fuse.
Fuse.
So, yeah.
Did I say something else?
You may have, but let's skip past that.
Sorry, apologies. Definitely Fuse. It's definitely Fuse, everybody.
Back webinars, no worries. Yeah, look, we're really excited, I think, to talk through this topic. And as Andrew said, great to have questions coming through as we talk through some of this content. And I said this is going to be a bit more practical, I think, so because we're obviously working and have embedded AI throughout our platform and are working with clients on a day-to-day basis so they can, I guess, start to harness the power of it, recognizing this is probably the biggest revolution in our industry. And as some people talk to not just a disruptive change, but one of those changes that happens probably every 20 years that fundamentally changes a lot of our jobs, a lot of our thinking, and a lot of how we do tasks. So yeah, truly exciting place to think about it in three areas. One's around personalization, one's around the ability to access our content in different ways, consume the content in different ways, and the third is around inclusivity and opening up and really allowing learning to finally get to that place where it's truly inclusive and we're getting to that democratization of education learning so everyone can learn from the best in any way they want to. Maybe one quick question to start with, which is just in your own personal life. So, outside of your work lives, when you start your learning journey, just love people to pop into the chat. Where do you go to? When you want to learn something, what's your go-to place?
Thanks, Steve. I've opened the poll up and I can see that people already. Wow, I love doing this. I open a poll up and then these little bars start appearing, and we can see here where people go to. You can choose one of the options that, or one or more of the options that exist from here. Let's just show people what's coming through so you can see the results. Interesting. Do we use YouTube because everybody uses YouTube? Interesting, Steve. What do you think of some of these results?
Well, it's interesting we left Google off the list, right? But yeah. I think what we're probably seeing is we're seeing things go through a radical change, right? So just as our learning habits are changing, I think you probably would have seen Google as you wouldn't have seen ChatGPT in there a year ago, or you would have seen it at a few percent. I think whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or one of these technologies, those are now becoming more of our go-to place than maybe Google was, a year ago. But ultimately, interesting to see YouTube is still the winner. So you've still got to get access to that content in order to have a conversation with it. So I think the two clear winners here are ChatGPT or let's say conversational learning and then video consumption. The two things that come out there as quite clear winners. So which is kind of what we probably expected and what we're seeing more and more. And the reason why I guess we love to open with that question is often what we've been on the journey for is how do we move those consumer habits and therefore these consumer technologies into learning platforms to give the learning professionals the ability to use this in a mass way so that everyone and every learner has access to the type of technologies that are familiar to us, but with inside the experiences that we have.
It's interesting also, we talk about the video, just to pick up on the TikTok, still very, very low. But the all I hear is people talking about TikTok from a branding perspective, yet we still prefer the long form YouTube. Or I'm hearing people's,
Well, it doesn't mean YouTube's also got short form too, right? So, but again, I think I did ask the question from a learning side, right, rather than just from a consumer side. It may be when we got 5 minutes to spare, YouTube Shorts or TikTok is our go-to. But there's definitely people learning on TikTok. I had a great conversation with a kid around inclusivity, and when I asked him what his source of knowledge was, that started a great conversation. It was TikTok. He's like 12 years old. But I think again, if you looked at these three types of technologies, right, you've got ChatGPT, which is really about how do I find an answer to information in a conversational way, in more of a text-based way or voice-based way. YouTube and TikTok are more about feeds. There's two different types of feeds there. YouTube content creators for YouTube spend a lot of time making their content searchable as well as ability to be found on the front page. And TikTok very much more is, how do I get your attention right now? But no one really searches on TikTok. So again, there's lessons to learn, I think, for each one as we think about that into our learning ecosystems and the habits we want to replicate from our consumer lives into our corporate lives.
Absolutely. And Chelsea and Ewan have said exactly that as well. YouTube is a better resource for researchers. Ewan, Chelsea, I feel like I don't go to TikTok to learn per se. So absolutely, it's the what are we using the tool for?
That's great. So if you go back to the slides again, that's great. So, and again, when we think about the use of AI in learning technologies, it's nice to maybe separate out and think about each of the three buckets of learning technology, and then see how it helps with us and how it's changing each one of those three buckets. So one is obviously the bucket at the top, which is the compliance bucket, which is really, in essence, if you think about what's the main goal there, is probably to keep the directors out of jail. That's success. So if companies compliant, none of the directors are going to jail. On the right-hand side, there's the frontline piece, and we talked about this as Boardroom to Frontline. So the frontline piece is really probably more that ChatGPT style of place where we're trying to find access to information, access to knowledge, the ability to do our jobs day to day. And because we can't retain everything, right? No one has the ability to retain all information, all knowledge that we've learned or need access to, just because the speed of knowledge is changing. So what we see is frontline staff definitely have this need for, I've forgotten something, I need to refresh something, or what's the latest information on something. That probably differs on the left-hand side, the bottom left, towards maybe this more area where we've got all this content and we want to be able to recommend and feed people the most relevant content from all the things we've bought, we've created, curated, and we want to be able to help people with their career, with their job, and help them close skills gaps, close knowledge gaps in perhaps a more structured way, rather than that informal way on the right. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, how we're starting to now use all these types of AIs to solve not one problem, but recognize, and again, there's not one AI that solves them all. So although we think obviously a lot about generative AI these days in the way of Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini, there's obviously a suite of other AIs that allow us to solve different problems. And today we're going to touch on all the different types and all the different problems it helps us solve. We're going to start, first of all, though, on the right-hand side. So we're going to start with that frontline worker, the day-to-day, and how does learning transform, and how do we transform our content using AI into something that is accessible in the ChatGPT style format, not directly using that technology potentially, and not using the open technology, but had given us that same capability to transform our content into something we can interact with. And if you look at the reason why I think this is an important challenge to run at, it is because of the speed of change. There is a need for real-time learning, as we call it, because of the speed of new products changing, because a lot of products these days are connected to technology. Obviously, we're using software every day. That software goes through, potentially most software vendors are updating their platforms, every few weeks, every few days. So how do we stay apace with those changes? And obviously our own products, processes, all those things change. So a big need to keep that frontline workforce and up to date, and the ability to get access to the knowledge they need to do their job. And I think if you look at, traditionally, there have been great models that help with that. So 70-20-10, that 70 bit, the big bit, is all about that knowledge and learning the flow. The 5 moments of need from Bob Mosher, again, the biggest piece of that is the same, which is how do you transform your content into a format that people can find the bit they need when they want to get to it. And we love these models and we think they're absolutely appropriate, but we also have to recognize that maybe they haven't been adopted at the pace we wanted to. I mean, they are ideas now that have been out there for 10, 20 years. And yet we only see maybe less than 10% of the companies truly adopting them in the way that a Bob Mosher or Charles Jennings would think is correct. I think if you look at, first of all, why we think they're so important, right? Why this for the frontline worker especially, this is so important. I think you look at that and say, well, one is that we know the concept of brain stuffing, which is the alternative to learning the flow and that part. So brain stuffing, especially during onboarding, isn't the most effective way to allow somebody to attain performance, and it takes a lot longer to brain stuff than it does to make the knowledge accessible. The alternative obviously is to be supported by performance support tools. But again, the problem with that is the migration of the content and the recreation of content. So once you've got your SCORM courses, your videos, your assets, your training manuals, how do you then convert that into format that performance support tool is going to access it? And that I think it's probably been the biggest barrier towards moving towards things like 70-20-10 and 5 moments of need, which undoubtedly, if you look at most organizations, they would have great case studies on the business benefits towards it. And how those models allow people to reduce that time to find knowledge and reduce the cost of mistakes and have clear ROIs when people do move towards it. It really is the cost of time of moving towards it. And that's why I think what we now have with AI and what we're starting to see rolled out now is an amazing way to solve that problem. Because what the AI now does in platforms like Fuse, and we'll show this working in a sec, is this capability to automate all of that. So you can just shove in your videos, your manuals, your courses, and the AI does all the hard work by creating what we call a corporate brain. So just like ChatGPT or Claude is a world brain and a consumer-facing brain, what platforms like Fuse now have is that capability in a safe, secure way that does that for all of a corporation's knowledge that they need to help people do their jobs better. So if we first maybe explain a little bit about how this works in the public web, and then we can talk about how that's transferred to internal learning platforms and knowledge platforms like Fuse. So if you think about the technology of something like Google or Claude or ChatGPT, what these guys are doing is they're constantly crawling the world of knowledge. So they copy all the content from Wikipedia, they copy all the content from your websites, from my website, and they make that copy of text in a big, massive database. You know, Google has like 1,950,000 servers that have a copy of that world knowledge. The second thing they then do is they then transform that text into a database that supports an AI model. So it's like called a vector database. But basically, it's an AI database that's in a new format that allows us to interact with it in models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and so forth. The concept of Fuse is basically doing exactly the same thing. So inside Fuse, we're doing exactly the same thing, but only on a client's private knowledge. So we'll take a file, we'll take a video, we'll transcribe the video into text in any language. We will extract all the text out of a PowerPoint document or a file document or a course, and all of that exists in a text-based database in Fuse. Then what happens is the same thing, we on our servers and secure just on our servers, that's then transformed into the same type of models we interact with on the public web. But now it's private and it's stored within each unique client's instance. Every client has their own private corporate brain, or every training company has their own corporate brain. And it is worthwhile using the analogy of a brain, I think, to think about this, right? Because the human brain stores knowledge for the first time in the way that a computer is starting to. So a human brain, when it stores a new bit of knowledge, takes that in from the multi places and then creates different neurons in different parts of our brain, and then obviously maps and creates new paths that link between it. So we have a part in our brain that might store information about cities or about people or about places, a language, and all those type of things. And as new knowledge comes in, we're connecting to existing paths, existing networks that exist. In essence, that's what this database is happening. Whereas our content before would pretty much sit in a flat format. In fact, actually, normally you'd have to get to the course, remember which course it sits in, then go through the text content. So we're now moving from it to simply sitting in text to this corporate brain, which if you uploaded a video, it goes, well, this video is about mojitos and waitering and chefs and so forth. So it's storing it in relevant parts of the brain, and then connecting it all together. So obviously we need to make sure that brain is relevant, it's up to date, it's clean, and there's all obviously technologies that happen both through humans and through technology that keeps that brain up to date, relevant knowledge, and informed in the right way. And that's in essence what we now interact with, and that becomes the heart of every new learning knowledge platform. Hopefully you guys are staying with me on this. Just give us a thumbs up if I'm staying with it, or I'm going too fast, or it's all good. But anything in the chat or anyone wants to ask a question at any time is cool. What I'll do now while we're doing that is maybe I'll just jump out and I'll just give a quick look at how some of this works.
Thanks, Steve. So yeah, it's really interesting because normally we're getting loads and loads of chat in these things, but I think everyone's just hanging on to everything you're saying, which I think is really interesting.
Okay, so let's have a little go and actually see it all live. Actually, if I can, is it okay if I show the entire screen, or do I have to share a tab?
No, you can share the entire screen. You have
Okay,
the
perfect.
option.
That
You should be able to.
makes it a bit
Yeah, and
easier.
everyone's coming back. Everyone's saying excellent stuff. All good.
Okay,
Thumbs up. Yeah.
few.
So
Okay, so
yeah, everybody likes what you're talking about, Steve. This is good.
a few. Just started is always about worrying. So let's go with create a pivot table, right? So this is just explain the difference. The first thing that we do here is because sometimes you want to just find the asset. Yeah, I want to know, how to pivot table. I want to watch a video. I want to find a course. So in this case here, what this system will do is it will look through all of the content that's either in Fuse or in a client's instant that user is allowed to see. So I'm allowed to see LinkedIn Learning because we have access towards it. And now it's picked up and said, actually, there's a video in one of the 20,000 courses and one of the 350,000 assets. You can see here in less than a second, it said, I think this is the video that you should watch. That's going to teach you to create a pivot table, which already is a step on. That's more that YouTube style experience that we said is number one. So what we're in essence doing is we're turning all of the content, if it's built in a way that LinkedIn is or the way that our clients do in Fuse with our learning plans, it means that you've now automatically got that YouTube style experience that I can find just a bit I'm after rather than the course I'm after. And the learning platform becomes your front door to whatever other platforms that you want to get to. But if maybe I think, okay, I don't want to watch the whole video, right? I just want to get to it. So I could just ask a question. I could be lazy, ask a question at the beginning, or I can type in, how do I create a pivot table? And now it's going to have a look at that and then auto switch and go, oh, actually, because it's a question you've asked, I'm going to automatically, like Google does, I'm automatically going to switch to giving you the steps, step by step to come through. So inside here, it's now saying, well, I reckon, first of all, the auto switch, I recognize you're not looking for a resource, you're looking for knowledge. So I'm going to bring that through and I'm going to help you. And also, though, I'm going to reference the video you've got so you can jump to that and watch Jenny's video. But also you can see where that's come from. If we wanted to go a little step further, so here's one I did earlier. Actually, let me just cheat a little bit so I don't have to type in loads of stuff. Let me just copy and paste that. And that's so let's say it's a more conversational one, right? So how do I have a career progression conversation? So again, it recognizing goes, okay, well, you want to have a conversation here. So it's showing me, and it's also showing me where all the sources come from to make that all secure. So okay, great. So I've started to begin a conversation around career progression. I want a bit more information though. So can you talk to me about that bit at the end about kind of career development strategies? And again, within a couple of seconds, so this is now turning from simple, answers into a AI coach for me, and using the content that's been created by learning professionals that could sit in videos, could sit in articles, could sit in manuals, and all of that now is being made part of the human brain that's creating this kind of AI coach capability, conversational capability inside it. And again, nothing's happened other than the system is simply the content simply uploaded inside it. Perhaps another different example of that, if I let's say take let's go with some of my previous difference. So maybe someone like Acer, one of our clients, lots of technical documentation. I'm asking what the Acer Swift laptop is. So it's a brand new laptop. It's got lots of AI features. And so let me, I don't know, ask about what are the AI features. So again, it's going to understand the previous context of what I'm talking about. So I don't need to refer to the Acer Swift type thing because it knows already I'm talking about that. It already picks that up and says, well, I guess you're talking about the Acer Swift, and actually here's the AI features, has some Copilot stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And again, give me the resources if I want to go in there and actually read a little bit more up. So before I go any further, is there any questions that come through or anything people want to talk through? Because I am a talker. So
a couple of questions have come through, Steve. If you want to stop sharing your screen, because okay, otherwise we're getting a mirror of what you're seeing. So
trying to find the stop share button.
Okay, no problem. I will see if I can do it on my side here.
Oh, there we go. Found it. Stop share button.
Found it. Yeah. Awesome. There we go.
Learning the flow. There you go.
There we go. And then put the slides back up again. There we are. There we go. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions. So Chelsea has asked, is it English only? which I think is an interesting question, because
Now,
I know that some of the stuff we're going to look at later on as well.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different things inside here. So there's, not to give all our secret sauce away, because I'm always aware that on some of these calls, there's that, remember in Willy Wonka, there's that person who's always trying to steal your the secret sweets. So I'm always aware. What's his name?
Slugworth.
Slugworth, there, yes, yeah. So it's Sean Slugworth, I think it is, yeah. So I think, so I'm going to give some of that stuff away, but obviously happy to have a private conversation to give more in the future. But so the quick answer is yes. A couple of things happen. So in our platform, what we do is, well, let me ask the question the first way. So the first thing is, by default, because the model is storing information in vectors or numbers, by default, you don't have to translate the content to have the conversation with the content in any language. So you can talk French or German, Italian to a training manual or a video that's only in English. So that's default out of the box. So that's pretty straightforward. But what we do have, and we'll come on to later on, is auto translation, auto transcription. So by default, if somebody makes a video in Swedish or German, it will transcribe across 50 different languages in the highest quality transcription. Actually, we literally just moved this week from Microsoft to a new AI engine, which we self-host, which is the highest quality transcription, which is pretty much almost perfect. And we'll show you an example towards the end, where it's really crazy, where we can go literally straight from me talking English to me talking Italian in a video, a click of a button, which is pretty cool.
The question from Amy, how do you make sure you're surfacing the best content? I think this is similar to the Google issue, which is because that list of pivot table resources was huge, !
Yeah.
So I think it's a really valid question. So how do we know we're getting the good stuff?
Well, the good news, so I think there's two good things there. Good news is the AI still needs us as human beings, right? And this is one of the things that it needs us for. Although there is some things that the AI can do and that we can do in the model to make things more relevant, and we do, right? There is a whole bunch of boosters that we can use to try to assume that one bit of content is more accurate than another. Ultimately, if people put information in that's incorrect, and if you have a whole platform full of incorrect information, it's only going to give back incorrect information. So there is, I believe, a new skill and a new role. And this is the part of the evolution, I think, of L&D skills and L&D roles that says, how do, between us and the machine, we keep that content clean? And that some of that is on our side to provide tools, which we do. But some of that is, how do you go and capture the best person? And if you look at maybe the example I shared on the screen, one of the clients, Levy, in order to get the best information, what we did with them was we went and actually videoed and captured the best experts within the company across 20 different locations. Literally it's just live video, but it's live video, post-produced, and creating 70 to 100 videos of their way of doing it. But that, to be fair, needs to be set up to date. Products change. There are things in Fuse where, for example, if a process updates, you just overwrite the previous process, and there's a whole archiving content management system capability. It's a long answer because I think it's a great question. And it's not something that anyone should pretend that, and I think that's probably one of the challenges of Copilot, right? Or alternative technologies. If you've got all the content in the world and no one's taking the time to make it clean, then the actual value of the AI is not going to be great. There are things that we do on our side, but it is human and machine together is the answer.
I think there's also we always ignore this question as well, which is that before we had all these technologies, guess what people were doing? They're emailing each other stuff. They are putting post-it notes on their laptops. They are doing
all goes wrong, right?
Exactly. But people were always doing and trading that stuff anyway. So why do we assume that because it's on an AI platform, it will be any different? So there will be stuff that people use which isn't the preferred way, but that's the way that they've done it, and it's how we build and work with that, I think, which is what's really important. Well, exactly as you say. Yeah, I think
the issue with the challenge, the problem we're trying to address is that problem, right? We know that most of the things go wrong because somebody can't find the right information, and therefore they either guess, ask somebody nearby, or put into a chat group, and that person gives them the wrong information. That's when most mistakes get made. Obviously, a central platform where somebody can flag it and say, I think that's incorrect. And obviously, in all our content has that flagging capability. But then also, I do think it is responsibilities of us as learning professionals to put the governance in place. And it's us to make sure the tools are in place. But at the same time, this is a key role, I believe, of L&D going forward, which is the accuracy and actually going out proactively to the best people in the business to get the best way of doing things.
Excellent. We've got a few more questions, but
I think it's always good to go with the questions rather than me just ramble on.
yeah, no problem. Okay, so let me go back. So we've actually had 2 questions from Andrea. First question from Andrea was, other LMSs and LXPs are doing the same thing with the brain, so how's his fuses different?
Sorry, I got distracted on the Willy Wonka thing. Sorry, one more time.
Other LMS and LXPs are doing the same thing, yeah, with a brain, so how is fuses different?
Well, I think again, I'm not aware of what everyone else is doing towards it. I do see what I think other vendors tend to be focusing on AI content creation rather than the kind of the corporate brain concept. I think there are knowledge platforms that I think are doing similar things to us, but I haven't seen other learning platforms. I think obviously, like marketing wise, whenever somebody like us innovates, then everyone's going to put a label on and say it's on the roadmap, right? So, and I think that's the big difference between putting a roadmap. We re-architected Fuse 3 years ago to start this journey to make data and AI centric to our platform. Therefore, we do have a head start over everyone else. And I don't want this to be a sales pitch, right? But the question was asked. I think we, because we made search central to our story, years and years ago, because of the belief in the 70-20-10, I think this for us is a philosophy. It's not a case of simply putting the technology in and then away you go. I mean, this is what we dream about, what we sleep about. We are massive advocates of 70-20-10 and 5 moments. And I think the ability to go from, as the question was asked, a bit of technology that inaccurately provides information to something that truly serves the end need of task-based learning in an accurate type way is very different. So for us, it's part of a core philosophy, and the refining of the product kind of gets us, I think, a lot further ahead. And I think we are further ahead. I think that others doing it.
Yeah. We asked the question was asked in the first session this morning, how people are using AI. And from the results, built word cloud, I got GPT 4.0 to do a summary of it. It's content creation. Well, the answer was either we're not, or it's being used for content creation. So in terms of what other people are doing, I know you were in that room earlier as well, Andrea. Yeah, you saw that as well. Andrea's second question that you had was, does the AI profile the user to suggest adapted content? So does it know, for example, your search history and then find stuff that you like and you go to?
Yeah, and again, I think there's a continuous journey here, right? So literally yesterday, we've gone from AI answers to AI conversational bits, and we've improved our search terms from 8 seconds to 2 seconds on average. The next bits that's now being added in is the increased relevancy, which includes adding in things like the role and the understanding of the individual. And I'm going to point to that, I think, towards the end, how we use more profile data to personalize even more. Because what's evident, right, is if the system understands, which we can do now with this, if it understands me, it understands me as my reading age, my job role, my knowledge, my neurodiversity, my preferred language, then obviously the learning experience is going to be, the engagement's going to be better, and therefore more likely to return. And what we see directly, and it's despite others maybe disputing it, right? What we see directly in all data is clients that have a user base of higher frequent engagement, those people perform better than the people without the frequent engagement. And if you turn a division from low engagement to frequent engagement, the actual performance metrics go up. So for us, frequent engagement is the end goal, and why we think about these technologies in this particular way. And that's a great question, because the greater the personalization, the greater the engagement. So if traditionally training is a one-dimensional approach, right? Whether you're at school or as an adult, we don't have the time and the cost traditionally to design multiple formats of learning for different roles, different neurodiversities, different reading ages, different languages. All those are cost elements. What we're now seeing is all those barriers are being eliminated or massively reduced to now allow us to be completely personalized. And that's all either in the technology or being rolled out in the technology as we learn with our customers.
So I call it we've moved to just for me and just enough learning. So where in the past we would pile everything to people, exactly that brain dump thing people want, and they're more choosy. So it's being able to support that. John Harding, I have a trust issue. I'm concerned about AI deriving and delivering advice to a consumer that they act on, only to find it's poor or damaging advice. So slightly tied in with the previous issue. How do you mitigate that?
Well, it goes back to the previous answer about the quality of content. Right? I mean, what the AI here is company knowledge. So if the advice of the company is bad, right, and you've documented bad knowledge, it's going to give bad knowledge. If taking the Levy example, if they've taken the time to interview the top 20 people, I mean, our AI is only looking at company knowledge. So it's not looking at external, what Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT has gone and found outside. We ignore all that. So if you take the Levy example, where they spent time to digitize what they believe is their best practice, they vetted that best practice and they've signed off on that best practice. The only advice they get, that someone, when they ask a question in our platform for that client, is going to be advice from their best people. Mm-hmm. If obviously you put a whole bunch of stuff inside there that is you don't agree with, which would be crazy, then you're going to get bad advice. But the advice is only as good as what you put into it. So if you can digitize your best people's advice, the system will only reflect the advice that you've said is officially the right type stuff.
Which is the value of having your own system, as opposed to letting people go and wander off and use whatever system they happen to be using.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it even on technical advice, right? So we can see it today. You can see it today. You could ask a question on one of our clients, like an Acer or one of these clients, right? Or a Hilti. And when a question is up, you could do both literally. And 5 out of 10 questions that are probably asked publicly are probably not the right advice. Versus it's 100% advice inside our platform, but because you're containing where it's going to.
Yeah.
So automatically, right? The big benefit of this is you control it, versus the public stuff is you don't control.
Interesting question about reporting. So what's the reporting tool look like at the back end of this?
Yeah, I mean, we track everything, right? And obviously we're tracking every click, every like. So we at the moment have about 350 different data points that we track, and there's a whole new set of tracking that's coming into here. So the popular questions that get asked correctly, you can see inside there the thumbs up, thumbs down stuff, so we can see how accurate towards it, right? So this is a whole, it opens up a whole new avenue, right? Whereas beforehand we may measure how many times content is opened as a measurement, or how many times people go back to content or refer to content, or that type way. This is now a new metric, right? Because obviously now, to people to get value, if I want to know, like in Google Maps, do I go left or right? I don't want to have to, measurement of success isn't going through a course or going through a video. It's the quickest period of time I can go in and get the answer out. Again, our measurement of success that we see has the highest correlation of business value as a generic measurement is frequency of engagement. So we can see in the data the clients and the users who go to the platform at a certain level of frequency perform better than those that don't. And we see a far lower correlation between the amount of content consumed, the amount of courses consumed, and the performance increase. So if somebody goes through 5 courses once in a week, generally speaking, there's a pretty low connection or correlation to performance. The people that go back 2-3 times a week or multiple times a day, but may only go in for 5 seconds to find an answer, but it's accurate answer rather than the person next to them answer, those people we see perform better in their KPIs when you look at en masse.
I've got a book coming out in about 10 days' time, which exactly picks up on that, about how we must be collecting that data in a much more effective way in L&D, because we don't look at that data. Really interesting question from Kat. I like this. This is a good question, because we know that AIs can hallucinate. So is there a way for AI to distinguish between real and unreal information? Have you got anything in place to work around unreal and hallucinatory kind of support around that?
Again, I think this goes back to that question of what's the difference between, I guess our view of the world and someone else's, right? And that's these are things that we've been, uber focused on. So again, one thing is there is lots of control you can do. The biggest control is not looking at outside content, right? So that's the biggest thing. You're going to reduce hallucination massively by not looking outside, which is what we do by default. The second thing that we maybe showed, and if I go back maybe to, if I go forward a little bit actually, to this part here. So you can see here, this is the part where on every answer or conversation, it's showing you the sources that of knowledge it gets from, right? So I can see, there's 3 maybe references, but I can see the exact text or the chunk of text it's used to create that recommendation or answer for me, which then I can then click and go to that manual video and so forth towards it. So there's obviously the ability to build trust because you've actually directly got access. And sometimes what happens is you go, oh my God, I need to update that content. That content's from 3 years ago. I should have deleted it, or I should have got rid of it, or it's now out of date, or maybe it's incorrect, right? But obviously that goes back to any content, any course content, and any learning content that's out there. But so one aspect towards it is that, and the other bit is inside us. Obviously, there's the secret sauce of what we do to make sure that we reduce or eliminate hallucinations by having really smart AI search engineers that are dedicated to doing this for their lives.
Good stuff. Thanks, Steve. Edwin has asked, so what feedback have you had from customers in terms of use on the front line? So have you had frontline feedback from this?
Yeah, so literally this is being rolled out now as we speak. But the feedback, I mean, this is a big change, right? Because it's a change. It's not a case of you put it out there and everyone automatically understands how to use it, right? So there's got to be some change management that goes with it. In the same way that Google used to do advertising for questions and answers on Google. So inside here, I think there is an understanding that just because you have this technology, most people don't expect this technology to be within their organizations. But once they do and they get value from it, then it goes like wildfire. So, there is a change part, and obviously it is use case specific. So things like call centers, this is potentially reducing average handling time by half for salespeople. And this is where we evolve from this simple part more to agents and workflow automation. But there are solutions being designed specifically for different use cases. And that's the beautiful, interesting thing about the future of L&D. Like, this is a new tool to harness inside the portfolio of tools to figure out, how do you build your content differently? How much do we not need to brain stuff anymore? But also, how do we need to get the new habit of talking to our platform? That isn't a habit that most people would do, right? So especially if a client has gone from instructor-led training to SCORM courses, and that's the only part, there is a change that needs to happen and an awareness. But again, there's lots of ways to do that, but maybe not all to cover on a 1 hour webinar.
Another question from Andrea. It's tied in partly to the personalization one from before, which is about how you integrate. Can you integrate competencies or skills maps or roles?
You can, and I'm aware of the fact I'm probably about 15% of the way through the webinar so far. So I love the question, but maybe I should skip through, because otherwise we're not going to get to any of that stuff, right? So
we've got 18 minutes left, Steve.
There you go, exactly. So let me skip through a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So because this is just one tiny little part that we talked about, right? Which is automating performance support, about the ability to fuse different experts together to create new knowledge and conversation with that corporate brain. We touched briefly around the AI coaches. That's what we now start to see, the ability to talk to the AI in different ways and in different patterns, depending upon how we want to. How the AI is now surfacing itself in different. So for us, as we're going through a UX refresh, we did a re-architecture of the back engine first, and every page of our UX refresh now has AI embedded in terms of it. So and being obviously context sensitive to that page and that function you're doing, whether that's a learning plan, whether that's a coaching conversation. So all of the things are related to that. We hit the point about it being universally accessible, and this is the point we were making earlier on about. I do think there's a fundamental. This is what I genuinely believe allows 70-20-10 5 moments in the concepts, which are great concepts that haven't scaled to be scaled in the same way that an impact of Google Maps has impacted the car industry, from your taxi drivers in London with black taxis, not scaling out and having to retain everything towards this more knowledge in the flow of work type stuff. So let me hit that bit about the skills, and maybe on that skills bit. So the answer towards that would be a quick yes. Again, different set of technologies, different applications of AI. But again, if you look at someone like YouTube, which you mentioned, if you go back, I don't know, like 5 years, the number one access point for YouTube videos would be search. Today, it's actually the front page. It's not to say that the number of searches are not happening, but now they've really worked out the front end page. And they do that because they have a recommendation engine that uses hundreds of different variables, events, triggers for each individual to try to surface and create different feeds that's going to make you want to click on something and then click on something else afterwards. And more importantly, come back, right? Because you had a good experience. And curiosity is the thing that it's using to make you go back, in my case, every day. In the evening, it's my kind of go-to brain, my vegetation state for 10 minutes just to kind of decode from the day. So that's what YouTube does. If you look at what most learning platforms have done, probably up until now with these systems, is they've used a very simple recommendation, right? Which is, because you've gone through a course on tax, you must be interested in tax, and here's 4 more tax courses. So those systems are not really, the first generation probably missed it and missed the benefit of machine learning AI. This is different from generative AI. This is a machine learning AI, which is what recommendation systems are based on. But obviously, what's now possible is, platforms like Fuse are now able to leverage these type of technologies that YouTube have, to use those hundreds of different variables and decide which variables allows us to want to create different feeds. And we tend to think about 3 types of feeds, right, in terms of pulling people back in. A curiosity feed, this is kind of like your YouTube part, which is trying to work out what is interesting to you, and that's going to make you want to come back every week or a couple of times a week. So it's popular content that's relevant to you, that's interesting to you, and towards that. Versus maybe that feed in the middle there, that is around, actually, I need to feed you new knowledge about your job, because process change, products change, ideas change. So I want to understand you, I want to understand your role, and I want to understand the knowledge that's changing to feed you with that stuff. The third one then is that feed underneath it. Again, this is not the layout. This is just illustrative to understand the different technologies of recommendation engines. The third one is the skills one, right? And the skills one will come into deeper because there's multiple problems around skills that need to be addressed. But ultimately, what a learner is going to get is understand your skills gaps, understand your skills gaps in your current role and your future role, and therefore there's some recommendations of content or experiences that we believe will be beneficial, that if you watch, read, attended, or the activities on, that's going to accelerate you towards the skills gaps and the ability to perform. And then obviously you've got your traditional compliance type feed, which is these are the courses you must do to keep the directors out of jail. So nice way to think about it is those 4 feeds. And that's how we think about it, as we think about how do we fine tune the perfect engine with the right variables that's going to give us the biggest impact across those 4. If I then take the skills piece specifically, right, because we talked about front office, if we look at the head office, it's generally speaking a different challenge, which is thousands of roles, hundreds of roles, thousands of skills, loads of different skills gaps, and how do you take all of that complexity and make and automate the answer with the knowledge that actually a lot of the time, if you've got different vendors, each of those vendors may have a different taxonomy to refer to courses, a different skills taxonomy or a different knowledge taxonomy. So most companies would have, like LinkedIn has its skills taxonomy, Udemy doesn't have a skills taxonomy, but it has its own subject taxonomy. You have, every company has its own unique product taxonomy, how its own language around its own products and services. And then maybe some of the content you have has no tags at all. But if you recognize somebody's got a gap on problem solving communications, well, everyone's got different taxonomies. How do you speak one language to be able to serve up the best bit of content for that individual, especially in a world where that content may change? If you buy a library from a Udemy or Go One or so forth, those libraries change frequently, the content changes frequently, and you've got to source in all those different places to somehow, ideally, and if you don't dynamically do it, I think this is why it's almost impossible to find one company a day that can say they've got a great strategy around skills gaps. Almost impossible, I think, to find a successful company, because ultimately it's come down to loads of manual mapping. And that manual mapping piece, where you're mapping a skills gap to one bit of content, becomes pretty outdated when you look at hundreds or thousands of skills gaps that have got to be mapped. So we look at our part, right? So what some of the things we think about and we're doing and have done to solve that. One is a universal tagger, the ability to tag against one taxonomy, to retag all content, so everything has the same language. And then to understand job roles, understand focus skills, and then to understand the people get to, so that they are able then to dynamically create recommendations as skills gap change and as content changes. So your page literally changes dynamically as content changes and skills gap change. So that I mean, I know we're going at super fast pace now, so apologies for that. And there is a little bit around the inclusivity I'd love to cover. But does that answer some of the question from the I think Kat asked a question around some of the space stuff.
I think so. It's I love the 4 elements, which I think is interesting. Yep, amazing. People smiling. Yeah, thanks. Really, really useful. So thanks.
Okay, so on 10 minutes left. So onto the last one. I keep the questions going because the questions are brilliant. Again, I think we started Fuse, and I started Fuse on the base of how do you democratize learning for kids and adults. And for those who don't know, we have a YouTube channel which has 1,000 videos teaching maths and science, and we have about 10 million kids a year that go through that. But up until recently, those kids, they had to speak English, or learning in English, because that was all we could afford to create. which means a lot of people are probably learning in who are watching the videos, it's not their mother tongue. And therefore, that's automatically a barrier towards it. And exactly the same for adults, right? You know, it's harder work to learn in your second language than it is learning your first language. But obviously, cost and quality is a challenge towards it. So for us, I think, again, AI is a beautiful tool used wisely to allow us to remove or reduce these inclusivity barriers around language, around neurodiversity, around accessibility. So if we take, well, actually, let me take again a quick screen share, and I'm going to jump to something that's pretty cool to show how far the technology's come on, right? So what's now available and what's coming in our platform in Q4, but you can see it now working live here, is the ability to almost eliminate the quality of translation through AI. So as an example, here's me talking just in a welcome in English. Hey, just want to say that I'm really excited about doing this webinar. You hear that okay?
Yep, all good.
Yeah, great.
All good.
And I just pressed one button, and with one button.
Ehi, volevo solo dire che sono davvero entusiasta di partecipare a questo webinar e che non vedo l'ora di avere l'opportunità di parlare dei nostri argomenti preferiti.
So in one button, I'm now fluent in Italian. But what's amazing is the quality of that part towards it, right? So we want to put the slides back on, if you could for us, Andrew.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you.
I can see Sylvia is typing. I'm hoping Sylvia is dialing in from Italy. We have people from all over the place. So I'm really interested.
What was the Italian like?
So that's what I'd like to know. Who have we got here from Italy, and how good was the Italian response? I'm really am hoping that we've got some Italian guests here today. And please do tell us how good was the Italian that you heard.
Yeah. And generally, from what we see, people are blown away, right? And again, what we're doing in Fuse here is not just simply using one company. We've understood what's the best of breed technology to fuse different AIs together in order to make this available. So actually, individually, this is better than OpenAI. It's better than Google. It's better than anyone, right? Because we're able to understand. And lucky enough, we have this guy who's a PhD in machine learning AI that's understood how to put all this stuff together in that really cool way. So exciting. It's truly exciting stuff. So Ms. Moni says very good. So again, this is just showing you how far the technology's come on. And to the extent now with Fuse School, we're now able to create our content in Hindi, in French, in Italian, and make our content universally available at almost zero cost, at a level of quality that's maybe 98, 99% perfect, which is maybe it's not what you'd use for your compliance content, because you might still need human checkoffs on compliance content. But for everything else, especially for expert content, it now means that expert content is available 99% accuracy with good inflections, good language out to everyone else, which is, I think, is truly exciting.
Do you want me to show the video? Because the video, I've had to embed the video elsewhere.
No, I think maybe not enough time today. So maybe we'll skip that bit. This was just showing how the technology now is come on. So we've had translation in our product for a number of years, text translation and subtitle translation. I think now we're just showing you now there's two things that have now changed, I think, in the industry with AI. One is the quality improvement has a massively jumped. And the second is the utopian view, which I can now press a button on video and make my videos multilingual, which is, normally being the big cost when you think about human actors and all the, the ins and ahs of having to do that part towards it, which is very exciting.
And you'll be pleased to know that Sylvia has said it's very good translation. So there we go. When you have an Italian speaker actually giving you the feedback, isn't that what you want to hear, Steve?
Exactly. So maybe moving on to the next bits, right? So again, generally speaking, this might come as a shock for those that have come on it, but as a neurodiverse person, so I'm fully ADHD. In fact, I may be the poster child for it. If you go on Wikipedia, there's probably a picture of me on it. But I recognize I learn differently, right? Bite-sized content, short content is great for me. When I want to hyper-focus, I can, but often I just want to be able to scan and vision and get the high-level part really super quick. Versus that's probably different to someone with autism that probably wants more structure, more detail. And again, someone with dyslexia undoubtedly is going to not want to have to read through a whole bunch of stuff, but listening to stuff and to watching stuff is going to be the natural preference because of their neurodiversity. So when we hear things that people say, oh, there's no such thing as what people prefer, visual or auditory and so forth, that does kind of ignore neurodiversity, right? Which is real. And there are preferences that come with it. And I think what we're seeing is as more people get tested, we're going to see that the amount of junior diversity we have in the population isn't 15%, it might be close to 30%. And in frontline workers, it actually is 30% in most frontline workers for the ones that have done the research. The reason why we mention that, right, is just as we've seen parameters to be able to change the conversational prompt based on your role, a sales role or engineering role, there's no reason why you're pressing a button. And we're already seeing this on other edtech platforms rather than learning tech platforms. But we're adding into this, we're adding in little buttons that might just simply say simplify the explanation or let me go deeper. But in time, what we're going to be able to do is literally read someone's how they interact to understand their reading age. We obviously already know their profile, their job role. We know their skills. We know their preferred language. So I think the more that we continue to think, what do we learn without being invasive, the more that we create an experience that is truly personalized and therefore reduces that barrier. Because most people, and I look at my kids as great examples, right? The only time they turn off on learning is when they don't understand something, and then once they don't understand something, they're tuned out of that subject. So we can find better ways that are more personalized to explain things and to help people understand things that's more in tune with them. We keep them engaged longer and we keep them coming back for more. Was there a question there?
Oh, sorry, dipped out for a second.
Just thinking, was there, oh, to need some testers. Yeah, we'd love some testers. Yeah. I think, and I think, look, this is a big journey for all of us, right? I think we are learning every week. We are updating our technology every week. Literally, I think this week we've gone live with the conversational AI. Next week we go live in the new AI transcription. And we're all figuring this out at breakneck speed of how to use the applications and how to test out these new ideas. So we absolutely welcome, I think, anyone that wants to come in and wants to be part of that learning journey tomorrow. And I've got a half day tomorrow with my chief product officer and CTO, and just around all the innovation stuff, which is probably happy space, happy and fun space. So I think in terms of content, I think we've pretty much gone through. I think the only thing that maybe we'd add as well is that we do see, obviously, on the content piece, and we've got our own webinar coming up, I think in a few weeks, 4 buckets of content. So there's a bucket of content, and I think all of this is changing, right? Your bucket of content around library content, your LinkedIn, your Udemy's and so forth. You've got a bucket of content around authoring, which is where we've partnered with someone like Easy Generator that does the AI content creation piece. You've got user-generated content, which we have a whole suite of tools inside of it, and then agency content. I think all of those content now, hopefully one of the things we clearly see is they're all going through a radical change, right? Whether that's tagging the content and feeding it to relevant people better, whether that's extracting out what's in the content to consume it in conversations, or whether that's voice or text. I think what we're seeing is the whole content strategy is being massively impacted by the suite of AIs that we've shown today.
Yeah, without question. This is this idea of instructional designers and what they're going to be doing differently that came out in the first webinar. Wow. That was 58 minutes of intense content. Just the pace and everything that you were going at, Steve. Yeah. If we didn't know your ADHD, who would be asking? But there we go.
Yeah. There's a little thing there from, I think, Harry Savage. Is there any impact on knowledge retention? I think here's the question, right? I think the question is, and this is why I was always a big believer in performance support. I think for everyone it's almost impossible now to find a role. Maybe 90% of roles, it's impossible to retain most of the knowledge you need to do the job in it. And I think that knowledge retention bit has changed massively year upon year with the speed up of knowledge coming through. So, and I think that's why the black taxi or the yellow black taxi, yellow taxi driver, black taxi driver example is a great example, right? That, I was saying to my kids my kids the other day, they've got an old school phone. I was explaining to them how you need to store phone numbers in your head. And they're looking at me like I'm an alien. And they ask me questions, they ask me questions, but Daddy, you're so old, you were best, they said what Jesus and Moses were in your yearbook. So it might be something that going on towards it. But I think to that point, if you look at the models like 70, 20, 10 and 5 moments, what they've always said is, what do you not need to stuff in the brain and what do we need to make available? What we know, right, from all research is the closer the window between understanding something and applying it, the more accurate the application of that learning and the more accurate of that task is being done. So one of the things that this technology does is it allows us to step back and think, what do we stop training, teaching, brain stuffing, and now that, and how do we view this corporate brain as an extension of our brain?
So so I put a link into a paper which is actually a study, so a review across a number of studies, and I just put part of the summary in there from 2022. The idea of interactive learning using haptic technologies, three-dimensional chatbots, interactive mining, etc., has actually shown to increase students' understanding and comprehension. So using these technologies actually does improve knowledge retention. It just does it in a different way, which is exactly as you said, Steve. We don't pump people with stuff they don't need. What they do is the stuff they need to use, we find we get the better stuff from. We are out of time, so you will find a link there. So where it says next step, there is a link. Please click on that and get in touch with Steve and all the people at Fuse to have a look at the stuff they're doing. You've also got a link there for Steve on LinkedIn. Please do connect with him. I would expect to see that, Andrea, all these people connecting so they can all try out this stuff, and I've got a link for me on there as well. There will be a recording of the event, and a listings of the future ones will be out early next week as well. So please do have a look and see what else is coming up. But we are at 1 o'clock, so we are going to have to close the room down. A massive thank you, Steve. That was absolutely superb. And yeah, people saying thank you and excellent and smiles and stuff. So thank you for your for the session, Steve. Thank you for the audience, as always. It's always about the interaction. It's always about the questions, and the fact that we had to race through stuff because you're asking such smart questions comes down to you. So thank you, everybody. Brilliant to see you all. And we shall see you all again very shortly. I'm going to put you all into the lobby again. But once again, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for great questions. Take care. Bye.